Welcome. I'm Kreg Wagner, legal counsel for the Utah Association of Realtors. With me is Peter Christensen. He is the UAR Forms Chair and CEO of the Utah Central Association of Realtors. Thanks, Peter, for having us. We'd love to go through some of the changes or updates that we've made to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Now, Peter, we've had a little bit of time since the new model, since August 17th. What are some of the things the Forms Committee discussed when analyzing what changes should be made to this form?
Yeah, we finally had the benefit of seeing these in practice. And as I've spoken of many times before, we really, as a Forms Committee, had to react to circumstances that had not happened yet. And that was the implementation of the settlement provisions. And so really, really hard to do when you sit down and try to think, well, how is it going to go? There are a lot of unknowns, and so we had to make a lot of guesses. There were a lot of different directions you can go in those circumstances. And so we knew when we released these forms originally that we would change them. We knew there would be updates. That's the beauty of having a local Forms Committee. And big hats off to the committee and the members and Kreg for being so nimble and willing to meet frequently and really dive into addressing these issues. So, yeah, what did we discuss? Well, we discussed the feedback. So teaching classes about the forms, legal panels, getting calls on the hotline for Kreg and Lance, and then phone calls from members for us as well, listening to feedback from brokers and agents on our committee of how it was working, how these forms were actually, how they were functioning in practice. And that's invaluable for us. So we took all that information and had lots of good discussions on what can we do to improve. First of all, I think kudos that they're working.
Yeah.
The current forms are working. They're not broken. There were no glaring errors in them. So I think the committee's hard work paid off. But could they be improved? Yes, we knew they weren't perfect. And we'll continue to work on them, continue to take feedback. But this is kind of the first round of revisions based off of the feedback. And so as we go through them, some of them are not there aren't wholesale changes, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And when we look at the exclusive right to sell, really, the updates are in Section 2. That's the only section that we made some modifications. We wanted first and foremost to consider the consumer. We wanted this to be as consumer friendly as possible. We wanted it to work for real estate brokerages so that they could clearly explain to consumers what exactly are they signing, what are the commitments. And so we wanted to adjust some of the title headings and the language there. So let's start with that. Let's go to Section 2. And we'll have this available, and this is at all of our forms vendors will have this available at the time of this video. So looking at Section 2, this is brokerage compensation, okay? So you look at Section 2.1, the seller's brokerage fee. This section did not change. It's the exact same. So, Peter, this section, this is the fee that the company or the listing brokerage is charging for their services, okay? So that's your fee. That's the fee that you put in. Now, you'll notice Section 2.2, this is a new addition, and this is based on feedback that we've been getting.
Lots of feedback on this one.
It's not just locally, it's nationally. There's been a lot of feedback about this and kind of this ideal of what additional work does a listing brokerage do when a buyer's unrepresented. So what does Section 2.2 do now?
So Section 2.2 allows the listing brokerage to put an additional charge to the seller for under the circumstances that it is an unrepresented buyer, recognizing that it's often more time-consuming and more work for the listing brokerage when there's an unrepresented buyer on the other end of the transaction. And so 2.2, now let's be clear, it's the seller agrees that blank percent and blank flat dollar amount of the gross acquisition price shall be added, and that's in bold and underlined to the brokerage fee. So this is in addition to the fee in 2.1 if the buyer is unrepresented. So it's just agreeing to it ahead of time. Seller, this is our fee structure. We want to be really transparent about this. We want you to understand and agree to these terms. And that's how it works.
And that's flexible. So just like 2.1 is negotiable, 2.2 would be negotiable, and that's going to be dictated between the brokerage and the seller. So that's something that the two parties would come to an agreement on. Now, 2.3, this is familiar. It is very similar to what we already have, but it is meant to give some further clarification. So 2.3 is the authorization to offer compensation to a buyer's brokerage. Again, the blank in 2.3 is negotiable. It's something that's not fixed or set. And so it does give some further clarification language in there about whether or not a company is allowed to offer compensation to a cooperating brokerage. And you'll notice that part of the feedback, again, I mean, we didn't know ahead of time, but part of the feedback we got is, well, we want some additional flexibility, some additional options. So there is a new checkbox in 2.3. Peter, what is that checkbox in 2.3?
Yeah, so the way this is structured is it lays out, are you authorized or not? And the way for a seller to not authorize a listing brokerage to advertise is to leave the amounts blank. So we're not authorizing you, right? And that language is in there. If there's nothing in there, then brokerage, you're not authorized to advertise any sort of compensation being offered. And then, but if the circumstances are that the seller doesn't want the listing brokerage to enter into a brokerage agreement, so that one that's outside the REPSI, right? It's a broker-to-broker payment, right? Broker payment addendum, I think it's called. Brokerage.
Agreement.
Yeah. Oh, agreement. Yeah, it's not an addendum. Good correction. If they're not comfortable with that, they say, no, we want it in the REPSI, we want it negotiated that the seller will be paying and not the brokerage, then they check that box there, and it's kind of floating there on its own. But we wanted it to be very intentional, that it's standing kind of on its own. It's a lone checkbox out there. We wanted it to be discussed between the seller and the listing brokerage so they understand. Again, we want this to be super consumer friendly and transparent. And so we wanted to highlight, like, hey, you have this option. What does this mean? What does broker-to-broker compensation mean? How does it differ from the seller offering to pay the buyer's brokerage something? How will it function? And if you're not comfortable with the idea, then check this box, and the listing brokerage won't pursue that route. It'll all be funneled through the seller and the REPSI.
Yep. Exactly right. Just the options, hopefully facilitating a discussion. And then 2.4, this language really isn't new. It's just formatted in a way that it flows, in our opinion, much cleaner and clearer. So section 2.4, it's a new section, but the language isn't new. It's simply, when is the brokerage fee due and payable? And so the language is the same as before. The all caps dealing with compensation being negotiable and not fixed or set by law, that's still there. Very important. And so that language isn't new, but it is still really important to highlight to a seller and to go through as to, okay, when do I earn my compensation and my brokerage fee? So that's certainly an important discussion, and we hope that by breaking it out, it actually highlights it more so that it's more transparent to a consumer and to a seller as to when it's due. You will notice as well we did delete a seller initial box. Partially for that is that if you scroll down just the next paragraph, the very bottom of the page, there is a seller's initial. We just wanted to make sure that things were filled out correctly on behalf of a brokerage. We definitely want the sellers to still initial this page, but at the bottom of page 1, and frankly all the pages 2, 3, and 4. Is there anything else that you would highlight with regards to these updates, with regards to the listing agreement?
No, I'd say we're still working as a committee. There will likely be some addenda to this agreement to facilitate different circumstances. We contemplated how much we could put in that section before it got just too muddy, too crazy. And I think we kind of feel like we've hit our saturation limit with information within that broker's compensation section. We know there are lots of other circumstances, and we will for sure be open to feedback as we keep going, but we already are working on some additional addenda language that can go along with this to meet different needs.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Thanks for joining us. Hope this video was helpful in going through these changes. If you have any additional questions, you're welcome to call the legal hotline, or if your brokerage would like any sort of one-on-one training, again, feel free to call the hotline and we can arrange that. Till next time, we're signing off.